Hello and welcome to the West Ham Breakdown podcast with me, Callum Goodall, your host today, and my friend Jack Elderton. This is very weird, but I'm going to relish the opportunity, I think, because we're coming today to talk about the Bournemouth game. It was an interesting game, in spite of the 0-0 scoreline. I think there's a lot to dissect, lots to talk about, and lots for me to press Jack on, which is unusual for me, but I'm in the hot seat. So, wait, no, I'm in the host seat, you're in the hot seat. I think that's how it works.
That's usually how it works, yeah.
But yeah, how have you been?
I'm good. Busy again this week. Last week was quite a nice calm one on my side, but lots of work done on our scouting tools, so looking forward to bringing that back in the summer. We'll be running some of it on Patreon in the interim, so if people want to get a look at some of the work that we've been doing there, I think we've done some really interesting partnership focused work looking at changing the way that we scout centre-backs and full-backs, but also midfielders, and currently in development on wingers and number 10s, where it all gets a little bit more complicated. But it's been really good, because I think scouting centre backs is one of the hardest things to do in data. And I think we've made some really good progress on trying to understand the ways in which we can leverage data well, to make good decisions about what's required in different squads. But yeah, it'd be nice to highlight some of that, looking at West Ham, specifically going forward. Obviously, two cases to look at, which makes it more difficult. What happens if we stay up? What happens if we go down? Two different squad building scenarios to approach. But nonetheless, in either case, surgery at centre-back is probably going to be required.
Yes. Although, I think probably some discussion about some good performances from centre-backs in this game. I was very impressed. Also, hats off to you for plugging the Patreon so early on. You might not be hosting today, but he's always a host at heart. That's it. He knows what he's doing. Today, we will be talking about the general game, discussion of sort of how we felt it went. There was, in my mind, a real ebb and flow to this one. I think we started well. Then we kind of joked before the pod that the middle hour of the game was just a bit of a slugfest. And then, the back end of the game, it really livened up again. Then in part two, we'll break into a bit more of a tactical discussion, as always. I think in particular, a focus on how we were actually able to play through Bournemouth's press, which was something that we highlighted on the preview show as a bit of a concern. Again, plug the Patreon if you want to hear about our tactical plans before every match and how we would approach the game and how we would beat every single Premier League team without fail. That is where you can find that chat.
It's gone bold.
And then some of the substitutions, one substitution in particular, which we think had a big impact on the game that followed. And then in the final section, something a bit fun, which is what we always try and provide. But in particular this week, we're going to have a look at a few of the Bournemouth players who we really like, and also a quick whistle-stop tour of our relegation rivals, because obviously a few things happened this weekend. I think when we didn't pick up all 3 points, people were a bit worried. But then games happened on Sunday, and there's much to discuss. But before we get to all of that, let's talk about the game in general. I want to first say, having spent far too much time online this weekend, that I do not think this is the disaster that some people are making out. Obviously, we didn't get the 3 points, but we did get a point against, I would argue, one of the more form sides in the league. If you look at their form, certainly in 2026, they had a bit of a slump, but I would say that since the start of January, they've really turned a corner. And I felt like not only did we have a good game against the form side, I felt like we controlled a lot of it, even though we didn't have the ball. I never really felt like they were troubling us until the end of the game, when obviously it became a bit more of a basketball match. So I just wanted to grab that right from the off, because I want to frame the podcast in a positive light and say that this is really not that big of a deal. I think we can be proud of how we played, and we'll talk about all the reasons for that. Also, interesting bit of trivia, it is our first 0-0 draw in the Premier League in 52 games. So it's been 15 months that we haven't seen a 0-0 draw at West Ham, which actually, when you say it, feels a bit nuts. But we did then look at when the other 0-0 draws were, and it was a while before that as well. So maybe it's not as relevant as I thought. But I sort of have decided to look at it.
Not quite the good night Kurt Zouma moment that you thought you were. You again.
Yeah, man. Well, I decided to frame it as a symbol of our evolution from leaky to resolute, and I've not read that off the plan. And make of that what you will. But yeah, it did feel a bit like a must-win game, didn't it, Jack? Which is probably why I think a lot of people were up in arms at the end of this one. But are you where I am? Are you in the positive camp, or are you in the crisis camp?
I think every game to the end of the season is a must-win game in a way, really. I think we've got to try and find a way to go into every game looking to take points, looking to take maximum points if at all possible. It's not a crisis, though. I mean, Redknapp said at the end of the game on Sky Sports, if Palace win tomorrow, if Spurs win tomorrow, and if Forest win tomorrow, if all three of those teams win, then that'll be 2 points. Then it's 2 points dropped for West Ham. And I just thought, oh, here we go. It's 0-0. You can't be asked doing any analysis, and there's your narrative. Do you know what I mean? Like, it just, that's not the story of the game. That's not anything to do with the way the game was. That's not anything to do with the way that we performed. You can't control a result. You just can't. You control the performance, and then you hope you get the result you deserve from the performance you put in. You look at the way Forest played against Liverpool. They'll be gutted with the result that they got from that game. I thought they were by far the better side, and we'll come on to talk about that later in the pod. And it's just an example that I wanted to give here to show just how difficult it is, really, to get the outcomes that you sometimes deserve. We've experienced that already this season. This wasn't a game where we peppered the opposition and we caused them huge issues throughout. It was, however, a game where we completely controlled the opposition, where we made life very difficult for them. We made it very difficult for them to execute the game plan that's brought them the good form that they've been in recently. I thought we shut down the main threat extremely well until it started to open up in the second half, and I have my feelings on that. I'm always a little bit more conservative in the way that I approach these situations, and I think you look at the first hour and Ryan's performance across that first hour. It's nothing really to do with him, but you look at the way that we played and how difficult it was for him to get into the game, how difficult it was for Evan Nielsen to get into the game, how much Krupi struggled to get into positions to shoot, and they end up really looking to Alex Scott from range a couple of times, and that's it. So I think in terms of how you want to perform at home against a team that's playing very, very well, a team that threatens you when they press, a team that threatens with high recoveries, a team that can threaten in direct moments. There were no high recoveries, there were no direct moments, there was no pressing. So what more can I ask for, really, from a team performance? We completely controlled the things they're good at. And then you look at us and you say, okay, in the situations where you arrive around the box, okay, when you get across into the box, okay, when you get a set piece, can we be a bit more clinical in those situations? Yeah, sure. I think those are the bits of the performance that are the frustrating elements. But apart from that, we did so much right in the game, and that's the big thing to take away. And it's another point. And at the time, I felt a point gained. And I thought that whole chat about, oh, if all the teams win tomorrow, it's going to be curtains for us. They were never going to win. I didn't feel that they were going to all win. And when you look at the way that they each perform, Forest performance was good, yeah, but the other two not massively concerning, although the result for Palace really disappointing in the end, I think, given where they have been for a long time. It's big frustration, actually, that they've managed to sort of pull themselves away from it. But yeah, I think did our bit, and every point's a good point, really. Now I think you've got to pick up as many as possible to try and keep closing the gap. And increasingly, I feel like we're the team right now. I feel like we're the team putting the most pressure. We're the team making everyone feel quite uncomfortable, which is probably, weirdly enough, not the position you want to be in, but maybe the position as a player you might slightly prefer to be in. The pressure of a gap getting smaller and smaller from above feels sort of worse to being the team that's not, that, you know, has kind of, it's in your control to just keep playing well and keep putting that pressure on, and you play without so much heaviness on your shoulders.
Yeah, I think it suits us, doesn't it? It's like the conversations around what the West Ham way always is are conversations that bug me, because I don't think there's a definitive answer. But ultimately, I think a lot of fans historically have seen us at our best when we're perceived as the underdogs, whether that's the underdogs that are expected to finish 10th or 12th and end up finishing 8th or 6th, then that's great, with the plucky underdog story, or whether that's the underdog that was 7 points adrift in a relegation scrap and everyone had sort of already resigned to the fact that we were probably the third team to go down, and now we're punching above our weight and closing that gap week on week. I think that narrative suits us down to the ground. I think it suits the club that we are. I think it suits the players that we've got and have been in this situation before, albeit in a different context. Someone like Jared Bowen, who has been a star in a team and relished that opportunity, a star in a smaller team, and sort of getting that. Somerville doing similar stuff now, starting to get his credit by outperforming sort of what you would expect from a player in this situation. Centre-backs improving. So I think that all bodes well. And then I think it also suits Nuno. Like, just when you go to the press conferences, when you listen to his pressers, when you listen to how he speaks in the media, sort of, it does always feel like, even from day one, that's a manager that manages with a chip on their shoulder. And now on his other shoulder, he's got another manager who manages with a chip on their shoulder. They're chipped up, man. They got all their chips. They're all in. And I think all of that, hopefully, combined, will put us in a solid position. And I think the flip side is that you've got teams like Spurs who are the reverse, right? They kind of don't want to be the underdog. They want to try and be on this continued like ascension to be a top four side, but actually often under deliver. And now they're having the sort of hyper version of that, where they tried to be a top four side and now they're in a relegation battle, and that is not a situation that they ever want to be in, and not a situation they're used to really handling. And they're also in a bit of crisis with the new manager, and who knows how that's going to pan out. They've obviously just been duppied by Arsenal, which is not going to do anything for the credit. And then when you've got us breathing down their necks, a big rival, I would much, much, much rather be in our position, even though technically the board suggests it's the worst one. So yeah, I don't know. I feel, yeah, to your point, I feel like it's a point gained and not 2 points dropped.
Yeah, I mean, it's what I say. It's always better to be, look at the top of the league. It's always better to be in Arsenal's position than in Man City's position. But somehow it might feel slightly better to be a Man City player at the moment than it feels to be an Arsenal player, because you haven't got the pressure of like maintaining the gap. All you have is the feeling that we just keep performing, and we'll keep putting that pressure on.
You can't bottle it if you're not in a position to bottle, and the pressure of bottling it is something that kills players like this at the top level, because you just don't. They're also, proud's probably not the right word, but it is to some extent, right? They've all got to this level because they have a certain level of pride and a certain level of ego, and the idea of not delivering on that and being embarrassed to some extent is huge. Whereas we can be like, well, if we go down, which hopefully obviously we won't, but if we do, it's like, well, we were always up against it, so what can you say? Obviously it will still be massively disappointing if you go from match day one, but given we were 7 points adrift, it's
helps us play with risk as well, right? Like if you're holding on to a lead, you play with less risk. Whereas for us at the moment, I think the way that we're committing our fullbacks so high in attack, and we're committing bodies to try and connect with crosses and stuff, is a really good example of the fact that we feel, what's there to lose? We can afford to play with risk here and try things. Yeah,
I think that's exactly it. And I think you see that literally from I think it might have been the kickoff. I think we have a corner within 13 seconds. We have 4 shots within the first 6 minutes. And then obviously the game itself sort of levels out and it becomes a bit more of a stolid affair. But then again, right at the back end of the game, we'll come on to talk about this a little later on, but the risk comes back, right? It's like, no, actually, we're not going to sit off. We're going to go for this, because what do we have to lose? In fact, we have to win, or we have to try to win at least. So yeah, I think that's something to take forward and to take a bit of momentum from, hopefully. And in the spirit of momentum, we will carry on into part 2 after this break, where we will be talking a little bit more about some of the tactics, in particular our ability to play through the press and what role Mads Hermansen plays in all of that. Okay, so back for the tactical, analytical deep dive, whatever you want to call it. Pretty much why you come here, I think. This is our bread and butter. And there's a lot to talk about, actually, in this section, because there was a lot of stuff that we did well, I think, and a lot of stuff that changed the game. The first place I want to start, as I've already alluded to, is how effective we were in disrupting Bournemouth's press. Bournemouth are a side that, if you have listened to the West Ham breakdown or followed Analytics United, or even just myself and Jack for any length of time, we've got a lot of admiration for. We're both big fans of Iraola. We think he's done an incredible job there. We think Bournemouth play a really exciting brand of football. I think for a lot
when it goes well, when it works.
Yeah. Well,
when
in this game, it didn't look too great.
Right, and I think a lot of our fans afterwards, I was seeing a lot of stuff on social media saying, everyone talks about these guys like they're fun to watch. This is the worst team I've seen us play this season.
Yeah.
And, at the same time, you've got a narrative running in West Ham circles that this was a catastrophic sort of bad performance sort of thing where we haven't done enough to win a game against a team we should have won against. And I think there's something in the fact that everyone else who's watched Bournemouth this season, everyone else who's played against Bournemouth this season has come away and gone, wow, those guys are kind of difficult to contain. They're quite fun to watch. They do a lot of things really well, don't they? And we felt, as our fan base generally seemed to feel after the game, that they were really dull. They didn't really have anything about them. They didn't really create anything. So yeah, it is like with any style. When it works, it's great. When it doesn't work, and when someone can shut it down, it can look pretty. It can be pretty boring.
Yeah, dull. And I think a key part of that, which is probably a good way to sort of frame this sort of mini section, we were able to just limit the amount of high regains they get. I think one of the other teams that everyone associates with this sort of exciting, high energy, frenetic football is Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool, right? And how did they create so many chances? They pressed aggressively, they forced high turnovers, and they turned those moments into shots. I'm not saying that Klopp's Liverpool and Iraola's Bournemouth are necessarily comparable, but that is one common feature of the two sides, is that by pressing aggressively, they create those chances. If you look at some of their performances this season, I mean, the Aston Villa one is one that stands out. Against Aston Villa, they had 24 high regains. Against us, just 9. The only teams that have managed to keep those numbers so low this season, this year rather, have been Liverpool themselves and also Tottenham. So we've done a good job of stopping Bournemouth's plan A, basically their biggest weapon against most teams, and we've done a good job of doing that. And I think what's really pleasing for me is that I'm not usually someone who thinks of West Ham as a team that can do that sort of thing and play through the press, and I thought we saw a combination of adaptation, I think, tactically in terms of how we build up and the shape, but also certain players as well, and how they were able to contribute to this. I think I already suggested that Hermansen in particular played a massive role, and I think that's a good place to start if we look at sort of how we were able to limit Bournemouth in this respect. I think he plays such a huge role. We've spoken previously about the importance of having a goalkeeper who is willing to receive the ball, not just in build-up, but just generally as a backstop almost. Sometimes if your centre-backs are under pressure, they know sort of what position to take up. They know to run into the space where they can receive the ball and then play across to the other side. But also in this game, I think you see it literally from phase 1 build-up. Hermansen is splitting the centre-backs. We're able to build up from a back 3 where Hermansen is the central centre-back. When you don't have a goalkeeper who's comfortable doing this, inevitably you are going to struggle more under the press, because either you're going to have to drop a midfielder out to help create that 3, but then you're underloaded in midfield, or the players that are in build-up have less options to pass to, and therefore it becomes more difficult to play through, which is when you often play over the top. Or when the goalkeeper does have the ball, he's not confident or comfortable, a combination of the two words there, to either play to the centre-backs because he doesn't have that trust in his own ability to play the ball right, or to play out to fullbacks in those sort of medium, clipped passes, because the accuracy is not going to be there, so it's not worth the risk, and then you go long anyway. Now what we can do with Hermansen as a third centre-back option is you have so many more ball receivers ahead of those in build-up. You can push players higher, and I think this was really disruptive for Bournemouth, because the way they usually press is with the two-man press, Krupi and Evan Nilsson. Those two players, and I'll let you explain why from a more tactical point of view, but to me, in the ground, they looked lost for large parts of this game. It looked like they really were struggling with regards to how to press. And I think you can give a little whistle stop of how Bournemouth press. We did cover this on the preview, but for those that haven't listened, there is a very distinct style to Bournemouth's press, and they were unable to do that quite so well.
Bournemouth tend to start pressing in a 4-4-2. John McKenzie's done a lot of work talking about hybrid pressing, and I think it's been very useful as a way of understanding how teams press, how a lot of teams are pressing at the moment. But maybe hybrid pressing as a term is a little bit, it might be obfuscating in some ways, just speaking directly about exactly what happens. So instead of trying to build an understanding of hybrid pressing, I think sometimes it's easier just to talk about where players stand and what ends up happening. And if you look at Bournemouth specifically, it tends to be based around trying to cut access to one side. Well, it doesn't tend to be, it is about cutting access to one side of the pitch. And then once they've done that and forced you to be on one side of the pitch, so when the goalkeeper's on the ball, he's a +1. And once you've played to one side, then you're able to lock on and press in a way that you can't when the ball's in the middle of the pitch, because you have more risk and you have to be more spread out. So Bournemouth take this approach where they start zonal, able to be more spread out across the entire pitch rather than being man-to-man from the very start. And then you see situations like where the ball might just go straight into a striker and he's in 1v1 with the centre-back and he's able to roll that centre-back and is able to arrive. You stop those kinds of really direct attacks from happening. It's too difficult to do that sort of thing. You've got 2v1 on the striker, yada, 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 at the back. And instead, you press basically off the first pass that goes to one side of the pitch. So the goalkeeper has to go left or right? And then once he's gone to that one side of the pitch, you're able to jump from there and be more man-to-man, be more aggressive. And they tend to have this, like, there's this sort of diagonal 2v3 that they leave on the opposite side. So that it's usually the far side midfielder in the 4-4-2, so the winger, that has the kind of overload where he's stuck, kind of tucks himself in a little bit and leaves the far side fullback, but has this kind of half and half commitment where he's not fully man-to-man inside the pitch, but is available to also go out and press if the ball does get circulated back round. It's often very difficult to do that because of what Evan-Nielsen does, which is the next key thing, is he very aggressively positions himself to cut off access back across to the other side of the pitch. Makes it really, really difficult to turn around once you've committed to one side. And I think, you know, the most positive thing for us in this game is that front two didn't function very well, as you described, in terms of leading their press. And Evan-Nielsen does what he usually does. He tries to commit to one side very aggressively, but Hansen really, really good at sort of, you know, if you remember De Zerbi at Brighton, the sort of like stop with the foot on the ball kind of approach that we saw from Lewis Dunk, which could make it quite difficult for teams because it'd be this kind of moment where the tempo's really slowed down. It's like, well, do we keep pressing really aggressively, or do we just hold here for a second? And we used to get done by Brighton with this sort of tempo shift all the time. I remember Lucas Paquetá being a player that could get baited a little bit too easily, sort of like stand there in front of the number 6 and think, oh, I'm getting antsy and I'm going. And then at the point that he goes, you know, it's often very quickly into the they often have a double pivot, right? So under De Zerbi, so it'd be into the other midfielder who then immediately play it across to the free, to the spare midfielder. We would have to commit like Tomáš Souček up one to try and close that player down. And then the player that Souček would have been with would drift out into a wider position and they'd be able to play through and get a 2v1 on our far side fullback. It was often a big issue for us in those games. So, but Evan-Nielsen in this game starts really high, right? Like instead of being in that like tucked in position, he's starting really aggressive, and he's trying to cut off, which I think is a slight adaptation from them. I usually see Evan-Nielsen to the keeper's right, so on the left side of the pitch, but in this game he was to the right, cutting access to Disasi and trying to force us to play through Mavropanos instead. And Krupi is back on the number 6, and what works really well for us in this game are two things. Usually our fullbacks would be a little bit deeper, which would enable them to kind of like their wingers to jump on really aggressively when Mavropanos goes to Wan-Bissaka, who theoretically would be at right back. Then Adley would be straight on him, and then they try and force the ball long up the line, win it, and come back at us and sort of create their own counter attack from their press, if you like. We just played kind of without the fullbacks in deep build-up. A lot of the time, Wan-Bissaka was really high up the pitch. If you look at the kind of first few minutes of the game, Wan-Bissaka's actually in at like number 10, right up. Almost like, I mean, number 10, almost really a second striker. He's playing off of Castellanos and Bowen's wide right. And that makes creates a really difficult situation for the wide players for Bournemouth, because they don't know whether to stay in their slots or to go back and help out and stop the defence from being overloaded. And a lot of what ends up happening in the game is that Ryan and Adley end up kind of in the back line very early because they're following Juve and Wan-Bissaka all of the way back, and we react to that really positively. And this is what I think I really liked about our plan, which is it was an adaptation, yes, but it was also maintaining continuity with what we've previously done as well.
Yeah.
And this is really good when you find ways to make small adaptations to your normal plan, so it's not overloading the players with information. You're doing the same thing, but you're just going to do it slightly differently this week. Was that we still dropped a midfielder in, but instead of that midfielder regularly dropping between the centre-backs, Hermansen was between the centre-backs, and we actually had a midfielder almost dropping in to be like a fullback in build-up. So Mateus Fernandes would start as the number 6, and then he actually might appear where you'd usually expect Wan-Bissaka to be. And then this creates this really awkward situation for Adley, where he's gone back with Wan-Bissaka, like, well, my man's all the way back there, but hang on, now they do have a right back, and Souček's maybe dropped in to be like the 6 in that moment. Now there's a free player, and they're going to be able to build up really easily. So now I've got to jump forward. And that created loads of situations where we could build up very easily and get through. Because Krupi has a moment where it's like, do I go with Souček or Mateus? And Adley's similar. Do I stay with Wan-Bissaka or come out to Mateus? And those moments of uncertainty in the press for Bournemouth make it very easy for us to go to Mateus, and Krupi's halfway between, so he just takes a touch forwards and then he can play back inside. So and now we're out, and it's a couple of passes to arrive in the final third. So really good from us, and really good rotation in the group as well. So it's not that it was always Mateus dropping into the back line. It was Soungoutou, then it was Tomáš, then it would be a midfielder between the centre-backs, and Mavro would pop up in that right back space and be able to carry up the pitch. Really hard for Bournemouth to manage. You know, usually they think they would go into a game and say, well, I'm going to start at left mid, and then my position is going to be, my man is going to be Wan-Bissaka as soon as we've jumped into our sort of man-to-man pressing approach. And that approach of saying your man is this guy was kind of gone from minute one, because it's like, well, the first time it's going to be Mateus Fernandes, the next time it's going to be Aaron Wan-Bissaka, the next time it's going to be Mavropanos, the next time it's going to be Tomáš Souček, the next time it's going to be Soungoutou Magassa. And when it's that sort of washing machine effect of rotations, it becomes really difficult for a team that wants to jump into those man-to-man pressing ideas, because you're very confused about where everyone is and what position everyone's playing and what to do. And I remember Arsenal doing that really effectively against us. So I think it was maybe I can't remember how long ago, but it was when they scored like 5 goals, I think, in the first half or something, 4 goals in the first half. It was just, we had no idea who to pick up. It was, you know, Rice would be popping up as a 6, and Jorginho would be the, then Ødegaard would be popping up deep. It's really hard for us to manage the flexibility of the midfield and the willingness for all of the midfielders to do all of the jobs. And we didn't have the same effect. We didn't go and score four goals against Bournemouth, but that willingness to rotate a little bit in terms of the roles really helped us be successful against a team that usually presses so well.
I think as well, and I think you've covered it so comprehensively that I have very little to add, but in terms of those rotations, obviously it has an impact in terms of who is in the build-up structure, who's in that 3, and that sort of causes problems for Bournemouth. But the knock-on effect is that every time it's someone else in the build-up structure, it means that the players in front of them in the midfield are also different, and therefore the style of distribution is different as well. Like if it's Teus or Sungu who's dropped and Souček's further ahead, then maybe we'll be more direct in our distribution this time, and because Souček's up there, so we'll go for a long ball. Okay, Souček's actually the one that's dropped in between. Sungu is ahead of him. Okay, we can play it into the feet of Sungu because he's happy to receive on the half turn and he can carry forward, which begs a completely different question for the midfielders of Bournemouth. And I think that makes it doubly difficult for them to deal with, because they don't really know how to defend. It's like, should I get ready for an aerial? Should I get touch tight so that he can't roll me? Should I stand just far enough off so he does roll, I'm stood up against him and I can lunge in? So yeah, it's a compounding issue, which, like you say, it's not something entirely new, but I think the rotations that we were able to do and the balance that we found within the game as well was really pleasing, and I hope it's something that we see as we go forward, because we're going to come up against teams that press in the next few games as well.
Yeah, I mean, even if you're rotating players to do it, it's in a way trying to make this as simple to understand as possible, kind of similar to the effect of like having Tati up front for us as compared to Fulkrug, right? Because Tati's got the ability to go in behind or to come short and receive, and for a centre-back there's this kind of uncertainty of when he drops off to receive, is that a false movement to bait me to come out to then run in behind me? So the second hesitation you create actually enables you to get that separation to to be effective when you drop off to get the ball, and you can actually connect a pass out to Bowen or connect a pass out to Somerville or spin with it. Whereas what actually happened to Fulkrug was that centre-backs knew he wasn't going to go in behind. So there was no false movement to drop off to receive. It's like, oh, he's going to drop off. I can just smash him on reception every single time because he's not going to roll me. He's not going to spin in behind making a false movement. So it's the same sort of thing, really, is that, you know, you can't get into any rhythm of expecting what you're going to deal with. 1 second, like you say, it's Soungoutou carrying. The next, it's a direct ball up to Souček, who's like a striker. Or the next time, it's Mateus, who's moved out wide and is now playing a 1-2 with Bowen and going beyond himself. And it just makes it very hard if you're Scott or Adams to kind of anticipate exactly what's going to happen next, because it's a new challenge, a different sort of challenge with each build-up. And same for the centre-backs as well now, as compared to how it was in the first half of the season. With Tati, as much as he's been, I think, a frustrating player for us since he's come in, because in some senses you wish he would be a little bit more impactful in the box. You wish he would have a bit more presence and be a bit more efficient with his box actions. He's been transformational, really, since he's come in, just because of the fact now that defences can't really be sure what he's going to do, because he's so happy and so willing to do all of the jobs a striker would do.
Yeah, he's also just fun to watch. Like, he's got one little back heel every now and then, or like the bicycle kick in this one. It's like, okay, cool. Some guy that's going to get me out my seat at least once a game, which again carries a lot of weight. You need the atmosphere, I should flag, actually, in this game in the stadium was the loudest I've heard all season. And I think it's stuff like that, like moments, whether it's a pressing action, whether it's a bicycle kick, whether it's a back heel, whether it's a Rabona, like those little moments, by having these flair players in there, actually do count for a lot too. If we're talking about rotations, there was another rotation that I think we were maybe less excited about, but still somewhat pleased with. Our out of possession shape wasn't that dissimilar to what we've seen for a long time now. It's a 4-4-2, or a variation of a 4-4-2. Obviously, when we've got Pablo out of possession, it's just Pablo and Tati as the two. That's pretty standard. Obviously, we don't have Pablo, and we're not choosing to play Wilson up there alongside Tati, so it is more of a... Yeah, thank God. It is more of a rotational job. I think it felt as though the person who it was meant to be most of the time was Souček. I think that's my interpretation of it. But obviously, that is situational when you've got Souček playing as a midfielder, and all of our midfielders are taking it in turns to drop in. So if for some reason you're too far away to be that guy, someone else has to step up, whether that's Bowen coming from wide to go up, whether that's Soungoutou stepping up, whether that's Tejas stepping up. This had varying degrees of efficacy, I would say, throughout the game, depending on who it was that was taking on that role. And I guess I don't want to do too much on this, but given how many different players did take on that role, I was just curious to see who you think is probably the best option for this. Should it be Souček, that's plan A, or do you think it's better suited to someone that's perhaps a little bit more leggy and can arrive a bit quicker?
Yeah, it's funny, this one, isn't it? Because Souček is obviously the player that you want to be in the most advanced position from an attacking perspective, because if you look at the work that Pablo did for us and the fact that he was able to hold the ball up, be a long ball outlet, be a backboard, be someone who's a threat in the box, again, have that kind of box presence, be a bit of a nuisance to deal with in a way that, you know, it's not that Tati isn't a nuisance to deal with. He's just not quite such a big physical unit and therefore causes the same sorts of problems. So from that perspective, it's like all day, every day, I want Souček to be that guy, because he can kind of do some of the functions that Pablo, do some of the things that Pablo did, for us. And then also defensively, we know he's a very useful player who makes quite good decisions. I think one of the issues with having Souček there is very similar to what we saw when Potter was our manager, and we were tending to play a 5-3-2, and we were using Souček as a left 8 in that 3, where the left 8 in that 3 often had to join the front line and make it a 3, and that's because so many teams build up with 3s like we did in this game, like we've been doing for a while now under Nuno. And when you do that, you need to have a player go up so you're not overloaded in the press. Otherwise, particularly from a 5-3-2, you'll just end up defending the box all of the time if you don't arrive with that extra player in the press. And we saw consistently when Souček was doing that job that it was just too much for him to make that jump up to the front line. His pace to get there wasn't good enough. And then by the time he got there, the ball would be going through into the midfield area, and he'd often just be sort of taking himself out of the game by trying to make that pressing jump, which increasingly meant he would stop making that pressing jump or would arrive later or be more conservative in the decisions he made when he went to go and press. Which made us more conservative as a team, made us defend deeper for more often, made us defend the box more than we should have had to. I think more than we would have liked to with that shape. I think more than the sort of the plan dictated that we wanted to with that shape. And that's ended up being kind of quite dysfunctional is the point I'm trying to make. And I think Souček in the front two, with the energy we've seen from Tati and Pablo and the way that that's functioned, is not dissimilar to Wilson in the front two, in the sense that I think you've got two players who are willing to work hard, who want to work hard, who have a history of working very hard in their positions. I think Wilson's always been a player that's worked really hard for his team, but perhaps don't have quite the speed to arrive in the way that they need to in pressing situations, and can get beaten a little bit too easy when they're in the first line of the press. So it creates kind of an interesting question, really, about who goes and does that job, whether it would be Mateus or Soungoutou. Mateus, for me, is a player that has to be in the midfield because of his qualities at disrupting. I don't think we have a better player at the moment at disrupting as consistently as he does without making mistakes. Soungoutou disrupts amazingly, like first-rate disruptor, one of the best in the Premier League at just putting himself about and being someone that covers a lot of ground and being a nuisance. He's really difficult to deal with on that front. He's also really easy to deal with in some ways because you can guarantee he's going to make an error with one of his pressing jumps because he just wants to pour so much energy into every game, and sometimes the timing isn't quite right and stuff, so he can get beaten. Mateus tends not to happen to him very, very often, and the really nice thing about Mateus is when it does, he recovers so incredibly well, 9 times out of 10. So he has to be in the midfield, which kind of means from a balance perspective, Soungoutou is the one that I felt worked best because he's got so much energy to go and press. He's so willing to go and jump every time. Well, in the first line, that's fine. I don't mind you being really, really aggressive and energetic in your decision making. And I get my nice functional midfield too behind that's looked really good for a while now. The two of them look really nice together. Souček and Fernandes pair each other really well. Souček can help out defending the box. He covers the fullbacks exceptionally well when the fullbacks get a pressing moment wrong. In fact, I think it's one of the really underrated parts of his profile. He does that job really, really, really well. And then Mateus, like I said, has all the qualities that he has. Plus, he's also immediately in the position to help us most from a build-up or turnover perspective. He's the first receiver, and I like that because he's the best in those situations. So, as much as I don't really want Soungoutou to be the player that ends up furthest forward because it doesn't make any sense for his profile, and I would still line it up when it's these three players with Souček as the furthest forward, and whenever possible, it should be Souček the furthest forward, and the press we have to accept it's going to be a little bit more dysfunctional in those moments. When we need someone to go up there to cover the fact that Souček's further back or ended up too far wide or whatever, really like it when it's Soungoutou. I actually think it really works for us, and wouldn't mind if they did a bit more job sharing on that front. And there were more situations where it was Soungoutou a little bit further forward in the pressing moments.
Yeah, I agree. I also think as well there's a potential knock-on benefit, which is that if it is Soungoutou further forward and then Souček drops in to form part of the pivot, if you press well and you force them long, then you've got the benefit of it being Souček who's there to contest the aerial that then comes, and you've got a greater chance of winning that aerial with Souček being there. I also think you see it work quite well in this game in those moments where Souček is actually deeper and not pressing and they are forced long, and we know that Bournemouth likes to go long into the wide areas. It's the perfect foil in this game because Souček's just like, oh, I'm already here. Come on, try and contest that aerial. I dare you. Which is, a real benefit. So I think long term, that's probably something that I agree with you on in terms of a bit more of a job share. Can
I just chuck something very quickly out from the preview please. As well? And this is a benefit you'll get if you do tune in on Patreon. But we talked about, the option we gave for this game was Souček right mid in the out of possession structure. Whether that's quite right or not, I don't know. I mean, we were specifically thinking about back post defending and trying to cover that side quite well, and also Trofea getting forwards and, you know, and enabling Wan-Bissaka to be a bit more aggressive against the fullback instead of having to track Adley inside and then potentially leaving a bit too much space for Trofea. And actually, if you think about the one thing that did work quite well for them throughout the game, it's Senesi to Trofea as a way to get forward, actually was probably the most functional thing they did until they were able to attack a bit more directly and turn us and get in behind us a bit in the last 20 minutes of the game. I would entertain the idea of sometimes using, and I think this might work well for him because he's not in the best form at the moment, of using Jared in the front two, and then just kind of enabling whoever's closest to be the guy that ends up as the right mid in the shape from a defensive perspective. Just gets Jared a bit higher up the pitch and into more positions where he might be able to shoot for us. Because he's not really getting into enough of those positions at the moment from where he is. It may slightly refresh the amount of energy he has to dump into sprinting backwards and enable him to retain some of that energy for sprinting forwards for us. So I just, that would be something as well that I think would be worth, even if you just gave it a try for 20 minutes in a game, just to see how that looks.
Yeah, I think so. I think two of my biggest issues with Jared recently have been that he's either been too deep or too wide. So why not move him inside the pitch a little bit and further forward? It's like it combats both of those issues. I'd be down for that. I think I'm ready to see him in a two as well.
Against overlapping fullbacks. I just kind of feel for him. His form's not great in the attacking moments, but he also must just be knackered because the amount of recovery sprinting he's doing is quite big at the moment.
Yeah, 100%. Final bit in part two before we move into the final section, but Souček comes up again, this time because he obviously was taken off, and I think the two of us had, post-game, we had different views of why this might have been anyway. But in the context,
Cal versus Jack moment here. This is...
Well, you'll soon find out why as well, because it does make perfect sense for the pair of us. But obviously, one thing that is undeniable is that once Souček was taken off, the game did open up. Bournemouth hadn't really troubled us at all up until that point, and then they get a flurry of shots in and God, is that super bad? In and around our box.
No, you can have that. You can have that.
But yeah, I think I didn't mind it because whilst it did invite a wave of pressure from Bournemouth, I also felt that we continued to out-create and sort of have a similar level of, I don't want to say productivity because obviously we didn't score, but we did still create moments where we could have scored if we weren't quite so wasteful in front of goal. And for me, it felt like a bit of a departure or maybe a new lease of life or version of Nuno, where previously a lot of the complaints put towards him when he first arrived was that in positions where maybe we could have pressed on, we ended up sitting off. Maybe we'd bring on an extra centre-back and go to back five and try and see out the game. Instead, we brought on another attacker and really tried to go for it and get the win. And I, as everyone listening will know, I'm always going to favour the high-risk, high-reward approach that might lead to multiple goals for all teams. I know that you had a slightly different version of events, though.
Yeah, so, you know, your local Emperor Palpatine of OOP is turning up again. You can tell that David Moyes has had a big influence on my footballing brain.
He's Jack's Mount Rushmore is just 4 David Moyes heads.
Not quite, but he'd be on there. I felt that it was. I'm okay with doing it because I think there is a need to try and push. There is a need to try and win games. So I'm okay with trying to do that. I personally felt that we had such complete control and that it was so difficult for them to turn and get in behind us that the chance would have come for us. We wouldn't have had as many chances, but I felt that the chance would have come for us, keeping going with the way that we were playing. And this is really going to piss everyone off. Everyone's going to absolutely hate this. But this is where I probably would have kept James Ward-Prowse around.
Well, we were troubling them from corners.
For exactly these situations. 20 minutes to go, 0-0, have complete control, don't want to change anything really, but want to find a way to squeeze for a little something extra. Ward-Prowse on in the front two, not in the midfield, would be an interesting solve for this sort of situation, as in the front two, out of possession, straight into the midfield to help us keep the ball a bit better when we have it, being the deepest receiver. But then as soon as we turn the ball over, out from that position, let the other midfielders recover into the two slots and into the front line, and dump your 20 minutes of running around, because that's something he likes doing for us. And we've seen him do that job quite well before. Whether he's exactly that player anymore, I think is highly in doubt, if you like. So the guy that went and scored the goal that he did at Spurs away a couple of years ago, is that guy still around? I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, I'd squeeze for those little marginal extra things in these situations personally, instead of maybe losing something in the press and being a little bit easy to break on the counters and stuff, and hoping that you're the team that gets the goal first, and then you can change the game plan again from there. That's just my personal way of handling these situations. I know that that's not going to be very attractive to anyone else, though.
Well, if anyone's still awake, we have got part 3. If Jack hasn't killed you off there.
I'm so sorry.
And in part 3 we will come and give a little bit of love to some of the Bournemouth players. I think there are a few players who we are big fans of, and also a very brief whistle-stop tour of those teams around us and how we feel about them. We've done a lot of talk about how we feel about us. I think we're both fairly pleased with how we're playing, have a relative degree of confidence about what's to come for the rest of the season, but obviously it's not entirely in our hands. So we'll have a look at Forest, we'll have a laugh at Spurs.
Yeah, and just before we do go to the final break of the show, if I did put you to sleep, go and watch some of those James Ward-Prowse corners at the end of the game for Burnley. That'll wake you right up.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the timeline, I think, is already well acquainted with those. The amount of takes I saw on there, we should never have let him go. Which, yeah, you know what, maybe I agree. But yeah, if anyone else wants to hear about individual performances in more detail, obviously we've talked a bit about Souček there, we've talked a bit about Bowen. We will talk about every player that was involved in this game on Extra Time, which is a bonus podcast for our Patreons. There is a 7-day free trial, so if you do want to check it out, you will be able to go and listen to that on our Patreon. You will also get the preview of the Liverpool game too, so what a reason to join. But we'll put a break in there and we'll come back to tell everyone why we're going to stay up. Okay, we're going to have to keep it speedy in part 3. That's almost like an F1 lap, isn't it? I think it is P1, P2, P3. P3, we're going to go quick. We're going to break the time trial.
Is that P1? Is that maybe not where you qualify? I mean, I'm really not.
I think
the
that is true,
F1
but I think they split
person.
the track into 3 sections as well. P1, P2, P3 is practice, but then the section is in 3 things, and they can tell who's gone fastest through section 2 and stuff like that. So this is section 3, and we are going to be fastest on track. We're going to, in the interest of keeping it speedy, I will give you 2 players to talk about, and I know that one of them is going to be, I think he was the man of the match in this game, actually, which I was surprised by, but I'll let you say his name, because I know that you want to.
Adrian Truffert is great, isn't he?
Yes.
He's really, really, really good, and I'm pleased to see him doing so well. I would say this as someone, if anyone's stuck around for a while, you'll know that I banged on about him for years before he joined the Prem. My feeling with him was that he was very sort of custom built as a prem fullback. It changed a little bit, and I mean, if you really followed my kind of analysis of like left backs, you'll know he dropped down my pecking order a little bit, as we saw loads of prem teams opt a little bit more for sort of players who are a bit more flexible in the fullback positions, inverting fullbacks and stuff like that. For me, he's an out and out speedster on the left hand side, who can just dump sprints all game and not seem to really have any problem with it. And offers something as well. Like he'll whip a good ball in, and he's good defensively. So why would you want anything else, really, from a team that wants those qualities at fullback? And I think he's been really impressive for Bournemouth this season. I think he's adapted very smoothly to the Prem, which is exactly how I felt about him. I think he played really well here. I think there's no... we'll talk about on ET, but I think there's no coincidence that we're talking about a lot of people are talking about quite a disappointing Bowen performance, one of his more disappointing performances this season, and it's come against Triffer, who was everywhere, offered some of the best moments in an attack, whipping balls in where it didn't look like he had any right to get anything in, and then also pops up with some pretty big defensive moments to lock Bowen out pretty effectively for most of the game. And then when it came down to the crunch moment right at the end, for me, I think that maybe you could have a debate about whether that sort of thing is a penalty or not, because I don't think he's obviously made contact with Bowen but not with the ball, but he's done everything he can from Bournemouth's perspective to get himself in the way and affect that situation, and that's exactly what you'd want a defender to do in a last ditch scenario like that. So really, really impressed with him. If I get one other player, I will go for Junior Krupi, another player that was closely linked to West Ham, except this time not just because I've been banging on about him for years. I think he's brilliant. I think he's a fantastic young player. I think he's a superb link to the front line. And I think if he gets the opportunity, which I can't see in the current sort of meta, to play further, play more often as a nine himself, I think his instincts around the box are incredible. Some of the runs he makes, the timing of some of those runs. I think he was very frustrated with Evan Nilsson on a few times because he made some really good runs and looked to play it into Evan Nilsson, and Evan Nilsson pop it back, or Evan Nilsson play it straight through to him. Evan Nilsson did a very good job at all of holding onto the ball all game when receiving off of Krupi. But in a first 60 minutes where Bournemouth really struggled to create much, I think consistently he was the guy offering himself in good areas. Consistently he was the guy finding separation. Consistently he was the guy finding a link to the front man, finding a link to give up an opportunity to let one of the wingers run 1v1 against the fullbacks. Really impressed with both players, two young players that are doing great, a really great job at Bournemouth this season. Yeah.
Obviously, I'm going to shout Rayan just because I love him. I think he's so fun to watch. I think he came alive in the second half, as the game came alive, as we've discussed. Souček comes off, the game opens up, Rayan goes, oh, hell yeah, let me get involved in a bit of that.
He's killer in those situations. It's going to be so hard to deal with.
Yeah, it's that combination of like the pace, the upper body strength, and the sort of actual technical ability with the ball at his feet as well. And then if he's within 30 yards... he can strike a ball. He's got a real strong shot on him.
Yeah, it's sort of like Kudus plus Thundercunt.
Yeah. Just demonetized us with the...
Already everyone.
Very good. Very good. I'm glad you mentioned Evan Nilsson as well, because that is a player that I really like, but I thought in this game he was pretty pants, fortunately for him. Although in part because I think our centre-backs did a good job of making it difficult for him. But yeah, Petrovic as well, a player that we talked about quite a bit when we were looking at goalkeepers this season. Obviously, we ended up with Hermansen, but I think Petrovic was higher on both of our lists in the summer. And yeah, I mean, without him in this game, would they have got the point?
No, he was fantastic.
He was fantastic. Saves. The one where he went backwards to claw it out as well. Like I think it was the Wilson shot, and I was how have you responded to that? Like, yeah.
But also dominating his box, like some of the corners we dropped right on the goal line. He does so well in those situations. He's not just punching it, but he's clearing the box as well. Like you know those situations with Areola where he does manage to punch it, but it goes about 2 yards out. whereas Petrovic is getting proper distance on it off of his own line. Super impressive, which is frustrating because he's not actually played very well for most of this season.
I was trying to make us look good, man.
This year,
right, we really have got very little time to do this, but it is interesting, so we really ought to give it a little bit of time. Okay. Obviously, there are teams around us. We are still in the relegation zone, despite being in probably the best form of those teams around us. Forest have brought in a new manager. Deitch has gone. Vitor Pereira is in. They played very well against Liverpool, but didn't take any points because McAllister saved our asses in the final minute, basically. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about Forest? Are you concerned? Do you believe in Pereira? Do you think he's got what it takes to keep them up? Should we be worried, basically?
I'll do this very quickly, and if you'll let me, I'll do this on the teams around us. So my opinion
all of them.
On all of them. So Vitor Pereira at Forest, for me, the situation at Forest is not really an issue of ill-fitting tactics or anything like that. I think they've tried lots of different approaches this season. I think the big problem at Forest is there's just a misalignment in what they wanted to do at the club, and I think that's bled down to the players. I think there's a lack of belief and confidence in what's happened above them this season, because if you look at that playing squad, it is way too good to be in the situation that they're in. That midfield is way too good to end up in that position in the league. Anderson and Sangare have played so well for a lot of the season. Gibbs White, as we know, is a superb talent. Hudson Odoi is a great winger who helps you get to the final third. I think you'd like to see maybe a little bit more from him there than he's given this season. And then up front, obviously, they've missed Wood, but two good centre-backs. They've got a good set of full-backs there as well. Nico Williams, I'm very impressed with. I think he's a very good player. So my point is that that's not a squad that I think is performing badly because of ill-fitting tactical ideas. I think that's a squad that just hasn't really found the rhythm this year with a manager where the feeling has been right around the place. The decision to bring Edu in and torpedo the whole Nuno thing was bananas. Ange was bonkers. Deitch was probably worse because the performance levels were really quite poor across most of the Deitch era. Vitor Pereira is a roll of the dice on bringing someone in who's got a track record of galvanising a place and lifting it. They look like they managed to do that, and they didn't get the result. And we've just got to hope now that follows a couple more good performances where they don't get the results, because that will kill them again, because that's what's happened this season. That's what happened with Ange. It was like, right, let's lift it. We're going to be a bit more aggressive. And a couple of weeks they didn't get the results, and they went out of the players so quickly. And I think they lost the players a little bit with the decision around Nuno, because I think the players really believed in where they were and what they'd done the previous season, and then to have that chaos above them where the project they've kind of signed up to and succeeded with was kind of taken out from beneath their feet. I think it's very hard for a playing squad to feel together in a situation like that. I'm sure they are together, but these tiny things that change the environment affect what happens on a match day. So big for us that they lost. Spurs to Tudor. I mean, it looked very bad in the first game, and if he continues to play an aggressive man-to-man approach, with about 13, 14 senior players available, Van der Ven's hammy will go, and they will go down. So that looks great for us. I'm sure they will adapt in some way because you can't play like that. You just cannot play like that with a squad that's in the position that they're in, and actually in many ways with the lack of quality that they have in key areas. Centre-back at the moment is so depleted. Japolina it just cannot keep playing there. Dragusin struggles. And up top, they look light at the moment. I think Colomwani will be a lot better under Tudor, because I think he was very good at Juve in moments for him. So I wasn't surprised to see him come straight in with Tudor in there. And I think he will perform in bits of what remains of the season, because that was a relationship that worked at Juve to some extent. But yeah, I'm worried for them. I feel very confident from a West Ham perspective that we can put massive pressure on them, unless Xavi Simons somehow gets himself out of this rut where he just really doesn't look effective at all to me at the moment in a Spurs shirt. I'm really impressed with Burnley right now. I think they've got a really good spirit, a really good togetherness. I think that really helps us because they might nick a few points. I don't know if they've got any other teams above us in the fight left to play, but they're nicking points, and I think just that feeling of another team pulling up towards it is good.
They've got Forest and Leeds to play.
Fantastic. So I think that's a really, really good thing. I would be stunned if we catch Leeds. That's my opinion on Leeds. I don't see Leeds as being really part of this. I think Leeds, in a way, I almost hope have done it by the time we get to that last game, so that maybe there's a bit of on the beach kicks in there and we can go and take 3. Because I really don't see it for Leeds. I've not seen it for Leeds since before the start of the season, really, with the squad that they assembled and with the way that they've played, especially since Farker adapted basically and lent into a little bit more of the sort of physical profiles that they put together for him. It's too well built a group to be able to endure this kind of situation and come out the other side. Well, they've got too many players that thrive in these circumstances. I don't see it for them. Spurs is the team right now that I feel
has the potential to drop.
I really, really feel we can catch them if he doesn't adapt from what he started with against Arsenal.
There we go. You heard it here first, guys. Spurs are going down and West Ham are staying up. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in this week. It's been a bumper pod, particularly considering it was 0-0. But if anyone wants even more, then go and join that Patreon. There's plenty of good stuff on there. We're also about to drop an FM video as well where I've caught up. And let me just tell you, someone needs to appoint me somewhere because boy oh boy I am cooking with the tactics on there. I say that it's actually tactics that are cooked up in the preview, usually by Jack and Darcy, so every manager needs his assistants. That's it, man. Thanks, guys. We'll see you all after the Liverpool game on YouTube, and obviously you can catch the preview if you're a Patreon as well, but until then, come on your irons.